Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking a really deep dive into the hidden and frankly often painful psychological dynamics of one-sided relationships. We're going to map out exactly what's happening beneath the surface here, revealing the complex, eye-opening truths behind why we sometimes just abandon ourselves to keep a connection alive. If you've ever felt completely drained by someone who claims to love you, well, this psychological breakdown is going to explain exactly why we stay, and more importantly, how to recognize the patterns that are holding us back. So let's get into it.
Okay, first off, let's just validate that strange, pervasive exhaustion you're feeling. It's a very specific kind of burnout, right? The kind that comes from trying to save people who are already perfectly comfortable losing you. I mean, think about those moments where you're just staring at your phone, spending 20 minutes drafting the quote-unquote perfect, unconfrontational text message just to avoid triggering their mood. At first, you don't even notice the massive energy drain. You call it loyalty? You call it patience? You become the person who explains away disrespect because, you can see their underlying pain. Or maybe you're the one who always apologizes first just to restore a fragile peace in the house. But why does this leave you feeling entirely emotionally hollow?
Section 1. The emotional maintenance trap.
So that exhaustion you're feeling, it's actually just a symptom of a much larger issue, which is this really subtle shift from being a partner in a relationship to becoming its sole life support system. And the thing is, it's rarely dramatic in the beginning. It happens through a gradual erosion of standards. First, it's a postponed reply. Then it's a broken promise. Soon, it's just a little less respect each month. Human beings adapt incredibly quickly to whatever is constantly available to them. When you constantly supply understanding without boundaries, the brain literally learns there are no consequences for bad behavior. Your suffering and your self-betrayal become entirely invisible to the other person, simply because your boundless kindness is quietly training them how to use you.
There's actually a vast difference between connection maintenance and emotional maintenance. In a healthy dynamic, connection maintenance is a mutual, two-way effort to nurture a bond. It's like both people are pouring water into the glass. But in emotional maintenance, your entire identity starts to revolve around this constant, exhausting labor just to prevent the bond from dying. You're constantly out there patching the holes in the glass. We often stay in these broken dynamics because we falsely believe our profound suffering proves the relationship has depth. But here's the reality. Suffering isn't proof of depth. Sometimes it's literally just proof that we've ignored reality longer than necessary.
Section 2. Dependency disguised as intimacy.
Let's move beneath those surface symptoms to expose the actual interpersonal dynamic at play here. This is an invisible exchange that slowly poisons the well. In this dynamic, we have the caretaker. They listen, tolerate, adapt, and constantly shrink their own needs just to keep the peace. Opposite them is the consumer, who actively avoids accountability, disappears when things get tough, makes constant demands, and basically expands their ego to fill the space the caretaker gave up. It's a silent contract. One person unconsciously needs to rescue, and the other unconsciously needs to avoid taking responsibility for their own life. Most relationships don't collapse from one massive argument, They slowly decay through this exact imbalance.
Think about it this way. Dependency screams, "I need you so I don't collapse." It's fundamentally about consumption and fear. Intimacy, on the other hand, says, "I choose you without needing to control or consume you." It's built on wholeness. But thanks to basically every pop song and romantic drama ever made, we've been culturally programmed to believe that if a relationship isn't this chaotic roller coaster that totally destroys your peace of mind, then it isn't true passion. Damaged minds often confuse emotional chaos and control for deep love. Actually, scratch that. It's more like they think unstable, anxiety-inducing relationships feel deep, while calm, respectful relationships just feel boring or empty.
And this creates a cycle that builds a literal addiction in the brain. It usually starts on day 1 with this sudden, unexplained emotional distance. By week 1, the tension breaks with an apology or maybe some grand gesture. In week 2, affection wildly returns, making you feel chosen and super special. But by month 1, the exact same pain repeats. Psychologists actually call this intermittent reinforcement, and it's the exact same mechanism that makes slot machines so incredibly addictive. The nervous system becomes completely hooked on this emotional unpredictability. This cycle is wildly powerful because it tricks you into believing you're fighting this noble battle for love, when in reality, your body is literally just fighting the agonizing withdrawal of their temporary affection. It's a psychological prison.
Section 3. Jung and the Shadow.
To truly understand why people behave this way, we have to look to the legendary psychologist Carl Jung.
Jung introduced the concept of the shadow, which is the hidden, unacknowledged side of ourselves. He observed that people rarely have the courage to confront their own flaws honestly. Instead, they project their inner chaos outward onto those closest to them. And the shadow doesn't just look like dramatic, overt villainy. More often than not, it reveals itself through subtle entitlement, emotional laziness, and passive neglect. Some people will actually weaponize their own fragility, performing helplessness because they know for sure that a compassionate person will hesitate to leave a wounded soul behind.
Which leads us to an absolutely crucial psychological concept: psychological repetition. Why do we stay when we know we're being mistreated? Well, Jung understood that whatever remains unconscious ultimately controls your life. The child who once had to survive by constantly pleasing an unstable, unpredictable environment unconsciously becomes the adult who overfunctions in broken relationships. Your unconscious mind isn't always searching for happiness and peace. Sometimes it's literally just searching for the familiar. If chaos is what you learned as a child, calm feels terrifying. And so we tragically mistake this familiar, historical suffering for intense romantic chemistry. Crazy, right?
Section 4. The cost of self-betrayal.
Recognizing these unconscious patterns leads us to a very heavy reality regarding the toll this dynamic takes on the caretaker's mind. Judging a relationship purely by feelings is incredibly dangerous. Why? Because feelings fluctuate hourly. They can be completely manipulated by a well-timed apology or a nostalgic memory. Patterns, however, reveal the true unyielding structure of a person's unconscious. A person who repeatedly hurts you while promising change isn't making a mistake, they are revealing their structure. Observing repeated behavioral patterns without the excuses or the rose-colored glasses is absolutely the only way to expose the truth of a relationship.
And your body knows this truth even before your conscious mind accepts it. The body always keeps score. And you know exactly what this feels like. It's that deep, bone-weary exhaustion you feel after a seemingly normal conversation with them. It's the tight heaviness in your chest right before you reply to their text message. It's that strange, quiet, guilty relief you feel when they finally leave the room and you can just breathe. None of that is random. Your mind might be spinning lies to protect the attachment, desperately hoping they'll change, but your nervous system is actively being trained to anticipate chronic disappointment.
Which brings us to a really hard-hitting realization. You were trying to save a connection while the other person was simply trying to preserve access. Let that sink in. Once you understand this distinction, everything changes. Many people who drain you do not actually value the emotional connection itself. They just deeply value the convenience of your labor. They value having reliable access to your stability, your endless reassurance, your financial support, and your boundless tolerance for their worst days. They aren't in it for the connection. They're in it for the access.
Section 5. The power of awareness. Transitioning away from the illusion of the relationship into radical self-awareness is a lonely shift, for sure, but it is an incredibly empowering one. It begins by adopting a totally new baseline for your life. Empathy does not require self-destruction. You can deeply, profoundly understand someone's pain. You can see the childhood trauma that made them this way. You can have massive compassion for their struggles, and you can still absolutely need to walk away from them. Understanding someone's emotional wounds does not mean you're obligated to offer up your own life, your time, and your well-being as their permanent bandage.
You cannot save people who unconsciously benefit from remaining broken. Love alone does not save relationships. It just doesn't. Awareness does. Mutual effort does. You have to ask yourself how you can stop feeding the dynamic. It means stopping the endless apologizing when you've done absolutely nothing wrong. It means refusing to analyze their bad moods for hours on end. When you stop participating, you remove their emotional supply. Awareness is quite literally the only thing that shatters the illusions holding these unhealthy relationships together.
So ask yourself, are you really saving a relationship, or are you just prolonging an illusion? When you stop participating in a version of reality that only benefits the other person, you finally wake up. That compulsive need to rescue them disappears, and it gets replaced by the need to protect your own peace. Take this clearly with you. Boldly trust the behavioral patterns you observe, and always remember that true, authentic connection never requires you to abandon yourself to earn it. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning what's really beneath the surface.